Okay, hi Nancy, good morning, how are you? All right, everyone, we're gonna get started. Again, I'm Heather Joy Thompson with Perfectly Curated Life. Today, we're going to be making a summertime pavlova, which looks very, very fancy and decadent, but it's super simple to put together. And most of the time that we're going to spend making this will be spent on baking time, not prep time. So you can kind of put this into the stove and forget about it. So before we go over the ingredients list, let's warm up our ovens to 350. So I'm gonna go set mine, you guys set yours too. Okay, so the oven's warming up. Good morning, Jennifer. So the first thing that we're gonna do is just run through our ingredients. And the ingredient list for the actual pavlova is really, really simple and pared down. Where you can get a little bit jazzy is in the toppings that you add to it. So a pavlova is basically like a giant meringue. Just imagine like a small meringue cookie, but writ large. So it's gonna be like 8 or 9 inches, like the size of a standard cake. And then you fill up the middle part of it with pudding or whipped cream or fruit. Today we're going to be using mangoes, mango jam, and freshly whipped cream. So for the actual pavlova, we're going to need some egg whites, so 4 egg whites. I find that it is easier to separate the eggs when they're cold and then let them come up to room temperature. So if you wait until they're room temperature to separate, it makes the yolks a little bit runny and increases the chances that you're gonna get some yolk into your egg whites. So separate them while they're cold, but you want them at room temperature when you're beating them because you'll get more volume that way. Okay, then we have one item that I use all the time, which is cornstarch. I use this as a thickening agent in a lot of things. But then also we have something that I grew up seeing in my mom's pantry all the time and I never understood why you needed it, which is cream of tartar. And that is just gonna help maintain that fluffiness in the meringue. So if you don't use this, if you don't have this rather, you can use vinegar instead. But if you do have it, we're gonna use that, all right? And then lastly, we have our now empty superfine sugar. I bought this. I would never buy this again because you can just as easily make it at home. It's marked up like 3 times the cost of regular granulated sugar. If you have granulated sugar, all you need to do is put it into your food processor and pulse it for about 10 seconds, and then all of a sudden you have superfine sugar. But you're gonna need this. And the reason that this is important to have those crystals of sugar a little bit smaller is because you want them to dissolve easily into the egg whites. You don't want any kind of crunchiness or crystals that are not dissolved in your finished product. So the superfine sugar does dissolve more quickly, and again, you can make this at home. Hi Pat, how are you? And then lastly, we have vanilla, just regular old cooking vanilla that you're going to add toward the end of the beating process for this pavlova. So, as I mentioned, for our toppings, we're going to be using mangoes. I made this mango jam about a week ago. I did some canning. I made a mixed berry jam, and then I also made some mango jam. So I'm going to use that. And then also some fresh mangoes, which are in the freezer. I'm in Georgia and it's super hot. I'm actually glistening a little bit even though we have the AC on. So I want to keep those in the fridge until the very end. And then I've also toasted some coconut, which I'll use to kind of just accessorize the mangoes. And that's it. Good morning, Damon. Thank you for joining in. So the first part of this is just getting these egg whites beaten. And this takes about 5 minutes. So unlike whipped cream, which I explained a couple of sessions ago, we really have to keep our eye on to make sure that it does not overbeat and turn into butter. With eggs, I mean, you just whip them and whip them and whip them. And what we're really looking for is to make peaks that are stiff. So basically, if you put a spoon into the eggs and you lift it up, the eggs are gonna come up once they're beaten. If they stay in position, you have them beaten enough. If they're kind of drooping off to the side the minute you take away the spoon, then you need to keep beating them. But you're not going to be penalized at all for whipping these too much. You just keep getting that air into them as much as you can until you have the desired consistency. So for this, we're definitely going to use the whisk attachment on. I have a stand mixer. If you have a handheld mixer, you may or may not have this kind of attachment, which means that you'll just have to probably beat it a little bit longer, but you definitely want, the main point is that you want to get those egg whites really, really, really fluffy. All right, so I'm gonna put this back on. So I have already separated my egg whites here, and I'm just gonna pour those into the bowl. And make sure that I have this locked. So we're gonna beat these at first. Oh, locked it too soon. Put it down and then lock it. We're gonna beat this at first for 5 minutes because we really, really want those eggs to get a lot of air incorporated. I'm gonna turn this all the way up. Okay. So we're gonna let that do what it does for the moment. Good morning, Dim. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. Let me show you briefly what else we're gonna put in this besides the mango jam that I made. So we have some freshly whipped cream, which I've covered. I made this about an hour ago, and that's just gonna hang out in the fridge until we're ready to use it. And then I also sliced up some fresh mangoes. Now there are lots of different, so you can see those. So those are all set for us using a little bit. There are lots of different fruit combinations that you can use. Blueberries are really nice. Blueberries and strawberries together are beautiful. If you have a custard or like lemon curd, you can put that in. Yes, love mixing, licking those mixing spoons. You can use like a lemon custard. I think I actually have some in this pocket somewhere. Yes. So you could cheat and use a store-bought lemon curd, and that makes it super simple because then all you're really doing is beating some eggs and then adding on stuff that you can find in your grocery store. So lemon curd, a jam, and then you always need to make sure, no matter what fruity type toppings that you're using, that you also use your freshly whipped cream, because that's really gonna make it very elegant and tasty. And it's a nice contrast to the crispiness of the meringue. The meringue, when it's finished, is basically gonna taste like a giant toasted marshmallow. It has that kind of consistency, and so you want something to kind of balance that. So let me put these back in the fridge. And then, as an aside, I will share with you guys, I have been trying to limit, or not limit, maybe cut back a little bit on my intake of sodas and Red Bull. So I have found this kombucha. I found this at Target first, but now I've seen it at a lot of different grocery stores. And it has a little bit of effervescence, but it's really good for your tummy, helps with digestion. I have a friend who makes this at home. I'm not quite that adventurous yet, but I may try that soon. But this one is really delicious. This is pomegranate, but they have probably 10 different flavors. Pink lemonade and what's the other one that I like? Maybe like a watermelon basil kind of flavor. But anyway, drink these all the time. Love these. So I do not have my Red Bull. I do have my Red Bull with me this morning, but it's not on camera. It's over on the table. But this is what I'm going to be sipping on today. So what has been going on lately in the news? I know that yesterday, Reasonable Doubt, Jay-Z's first album turned 25. It's been out for 25 years, which is just impossible to fathom. It came out in 1996. Jay-Z has been nominated and will be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. And the reason that he was eligible this year is because his album came out 25 years ago. The rule for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is that you have to have been an established artist and have your first album out at least 25 years before you're nominated. So even though he's a relatively young man, I think he's 51 or so, he is eligible. He was nominated and then voted in. So I think the ceremony is later on this summer, but he and LL Cool J, Ladies Love Cool J is his real name, but LL Cool J are going to be the two rappers who are going to go in this year. So Reasonable Doubt 25. I listened to the album yesterday and this morning, some of the songs seem a little bit dated just because of the cultural references, but most of it still like 100% listenable and very, very good. Everything was 10 years ago. Only Earth, Wind and Fire and Frankie Beverly were 25 years ago. I can ride with that. Okay, so let's take a look at our eggs, our egg whites. I should have put on my timer, but I feel like this has been about 3 minutes so far. Just gonna show you what they look like. So you can see we're already getting kind of like a cloud-like consistency. So I'm gonna let those beat for a minute more, and then we're going to add in the sugar. Now with the sugar, we're not gonna just dump it in all at once. We're going to put in half of it, let it beat for 30 seconds, put in the other half, let it beat for 30 seconds, pause, and then let it beat for 2 minutes more. So again, all of the work, all the effort that you're going to do with this recipe is from this part of it that we're doing right now. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a spoon to put the sugar in. Okay, I guess you don't have to turn it off to put the sugar in, but I'm always a little bit afraid of like the blowback. It's humid here, so this sugar has already formed a little bit of a crust. So I just want to make sure I'm getting out any lumps of sugar before I put this in. Okay, so about half of it. And then we're gonna just do this for about 30 seconds. So y'all keep me honest on the time. I'm gonna try and count it myself. Okay, by my count that was 30. And now I'm just gonna add in the last bit of the sugar again, making sure that I have taken out any clumps. You want this to be perfectly smooth when it finishes. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to add in the vanilla extract. And it seems like this would really make the egg whites darker, but it doesn't. It's beating really, really well. So we're gonna beat this for 2 minutes more. What I would recommend is that you beat it for 1 minute and then take your spatula and make sure that you really scrape down the sides so that everything is evenly incorporated. You do not want any little streaks of brown vanilla extract running through your finished meringue. So it's important to scrape down those sides. All right, so again, at the highest setting. So I'd love to hear about what you guys have been cooking this week. How was your Father's Day celebration or Juneteenth celebration? What you have now that we are almost into July. We're like officially in summertime, and then the unofficial kickoff for me is always the 4th of July weekend, which makes it seem like you're like really in the throes of summer. Hey Bunia, my friend Bunia is here. Bunia and his wife just had their first baby, a little baby boy. So welcome to the world, little Mr. Parker, and thank you so much for tuning in, Bunia. And I want to say, Bunia, correct me if I'm wrong, is this baby's name Blade? Slash came to my mind, but I think this child's name was Blade, which I love. I have another friend whose baby's name is Jagger, and I love these names. Okay, so let us stop this for a minute and scrape down the sides. Bunia is like the mayor of Detroit. He knows everyone and is just a very wise and good brother. And I'm so happy that he and his beautiful wife, who is one of my sorority sisters, have expanded their beautiful family. Okay, so one more minute, guys, on this. Okay, and this is like, it's really thick, but as soon as you put water on it, when you're trying to wash your pans, it will come off. So it seems at first to be a little bit too thick to try and like just scrape off, but if you put some water on it, it'll all dissolve and go away. So we are almost done with the heavy lifting on this. The one thing I want to mention is that when you put it into the oven, the oven's at 350, we preheated our ovens to 350. The moment you shut the door, you're going to turn that heat down to 200. Once it's in, you're not going to open the door at all until it's finished. You're going to turn down the heat into 200, and it's going to bake at 200 for 90 minutes. Do not open the door. You don't want any of that heat coming out. But it takes a full 90 minutes to get this to the point that it's fully baked. But we're not going to be on here for 90 minutes. Okay, so that's done. And this is what I'm going to show you what I meant by the stiff peaks. So I have my little whisk here. And you see how that thing is like standing up on its own. It's not going anywhere. It's not tilting to the side. So we're good. Our meringue has been beaten enough. I'm just going to get that extra out. Now, I'm going to take my, what do I have here? My cornstarch and my cream of tartar. Right here, I've already measured these out. So a teaspoon of the cornstarch and a half teaspoon of the cream of tartar. And I'm just gonna sprinkle those over the top there. And then I'm going to stir these in with my spatula. You don't need to put this back onto the mixing bowl and mix it in the stand mixer. You're just gonna stir those in very fully. Make sure you always scrape down those sides and get the part that's at the bottom. All right, so everything, the entire mixture should have the same consistency and color and ingredients. I hate it when you're making a cake and then you get down to the bottom and you still have like crumbly bits of flour. So you really do yourself a favor by scraping down those sides and making sure that everything is well incorporated. Okay, so now we have our super stiff meringue. And here I have just a baking sheet that's covered with parchment paper. Now, one of the really nice things about this meringue is that it's kind of freeform. You want something that's more or less circular in shape, but you can kind of like play with the sides and make a little designs in it because, yes, 350. You can make little designs with it, and it's gonna keep the designs that you make because it is so stiff. The main part that you want to remember as we're putting this on and forming the shape of it is that it needs to have a bit of a divot in the middle. So you want to have a little pool in the middle where you're putting in your cream and your fruit and your lemon curd or whatever you're using. That needs to have a resting place, so you're going to create a little well. So basically the walls around the edges will be built up some, and then there'll be a portion in the middle that's a little bit sunken. So you're creating your own sunken space. So I find it's easiest to just kind of make one big ball, and I'll show you this in just a second, in the middle, and then form it from there. Like get all of the egg white out first. Okay. So right now we have our gigantic blob, right? And then I'm just gonna take the spatula and start to kind of smooth this out. And it should look like a beautiful cloud. And I find it's easiest if you kind of turn the baking sheet as you're cooking to make sure that you're getting all sides equally spread out. And it's really important for this that you use like some parchment paper or a silicone mat. You do not want to have to fight with this to get off of the cooking surface once you're done baking this. Okay, so I'm going to show you this in 1 second. This is the pre-divot state. Right, so now we have just our flattened meringue. Okay, everybody see that? Now I'm just going to start to kind of go to the middle and push some of the meringue in the middle out toward the sides so that we have a little bit of a depression in the middle. And I am still, now 2 days after the fact, trying to wrap my mind around what happened in Miami with that building collapse. I have heard of this sort of thing, like in a, like when there's an earthquake, you see this, or some type of natural disaster, but I've never heard of a building, especially not one of that size, just like imploding without prompting. And I read just a few minutes ago that there was some engineer who had warned the building owners back in 2018 that he suspected there were major structural problems because he saw all these cracks near the pool that indicated to him that something was wrong, like with the foundation. So I surely hope that this is not, like when they do all the investigations, that this is not found to be just some straight up negligence or people who didn't want to spend the money to make the correction, so they just let it ride, because they have not recovered many people from the accident site yet, and we're now 48 hours out. So, the longer this goes on, the less chance that there will be people who are actually able to survive this. So it's just tragic the whole way around. And the timing of it too, because if it had been during the daytime, like maybe some people would have been at the market or at work, but this is like at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So most people, are inside sleeping at that hour. So just not a good look the whole way around. All right, so I'm almost finished here with my little well in the middle. All right, so again, this is art, not science, so at least this part of it. So you can see I have probably a 1 inch lip around the edge. And so now all we're gonna do is put this into the oven. Again, the oven's at 350. I'm going to put this in at 350. The moment I close the door, I'm going to drop the heat down to 200 and let it cook at 200 for 90 minutes. So give me just a second. Okay, so we're all set with that. Now, because of the magic of television, we already have one that's prepared. So, you can see it has it does not brown, or it should not brown. If it's browning, something's off with the heat, but it should be like, kind of cured on the outside, but not super crispy. So if you touch it, like, you're not gonna get goo on your fingers, but it should be nice and solid and baked. All right, a question here. Yes, George Michael going on in the back. I have one of my many 80s playlists going on. So I'm just gonna kind of lift this up. And this is why it's important to have that silicone mat or your parchment paper. Okay. You definitely don't want that to like crumble apart as we are getting ready to serve it. So I'm going to start with my, did I go first? No, let's start with the whipped cream. do the whipped cream first. And again, you can just kind of let your mind go and with the different items that you can put on this. I did one around Christmas time with like hazelnuts and black cherries that I had sweetened, and then some Nutella. And for spring and summer, of course, it's nice to use the fruits that are in season. So we're using some mangoes today. So I'm just gonna take a dollop of that whipped cream and just put that in the middle of the well. And you really wanna be generous with your ingredients in this well. Some of it can spill over to the sides, that's fine. Okay, so this almost blends, and you're not going to be able to see that all that well because they're pretty much the same color. But I'll show you this. Okay, so that's step one. We have our whipped cream. Okay, and now I'm going to add in some of my mango jam. And mango is not an ideal fruit to make into jams because it doesn't gel that easily, but it is very delicious. You just have to make sure that you use enough pectin to make it set. So it has kind of a little bit more runny consistency than most other kinds of jams just because of the nature of the fruit. I'm just gonna take a few tablespoons of that and put that in the middle of the little whipped cream circle that we have. Okay, so now we have like maybe 4 tablespoons. I'm gonna add a 5th just for good measure. Show that to you guys in just a second. And it's fine if some of the jam kind of runs off to the side. And you want to serve this either immediately. If you don't use the meringue immediately, you can cover it and store it in a dry place in the refrigerator, but make sure that it's like completely covered for up to 2 days. But you can also use them as soon as they're cool. So we have now added our mango layer, mango jam layer, I should say. Now we have our real mangoes. And I'm just gonna take, I slice these pretty thinly. You can see that there. Oh, whoop, whoop. So that's about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just gonna put those around, starting in the middle. And again, you want to really make sure that you're being very generous with these toppings because the meringue by itself is really just the foil for the flavors that are going on top. It's not like it's, you know, like egg whites with some vanilla and sugar is gonna be like super delicious on its own. So the majority of the flavor is coming from your toppings, whereas the texture is coming from the meringue. Almost done with these. And then our last step is going to be to add the coconut, which I toasted twice because I burnt the first batch. I didn't realize it got brown that quickly, but I used some sweetened coconut. You can find it in the baking section. Just wiping this mango off my hands. Okay, so we now have, we're almost there. So the toasted coconut really only needs about 2.5 minutes at 350 to brown. And then you let it cool fully. And you have a nice kind of like honey colored coconut. So I'm just gonna take the coconut and I'm gonna put 1 little dollop of mango jam in the middle before I do this. I feel like you get a lot of bang for your buck with this because it looks very fancy, but it's much easier than making a regular cake or like making even a really good chocolate chip cookie, because those have a lot of different steps. In order to be like delicious, you have to put your back into it. But this is just straight up like you slice some fruit and you beat some eggs, and that's it. So we get some of this around the edges. Gotta always look out for our edges, make sure those edges are good. You don't want to overwhelm it so that you can't see any of the mangoes, but you definitely want to get that little coconut taste in there. All right, friends, we are almost done here. So when you take it out of the oven, after your 90 minutes have elapsed, you're really just going to let it sit for about 20 minutes to make sure that it's cooled, okay? But that's it. You have, let me move the camera for a minute. Okay, so you can see it's all done. Your dessert is done, and we are done. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will probably be back tomorrow to do a spatchcock chicken. I have recently started preparing chickens this way. Spatchcocking is basically just taking the backbone out of the chicken. So it's like, instead of being like this, it's now you're gonna cook it like that. Everything is flattened. It cuts down on your cooking time and you still get a really delicious bird. You can spatchcock any kind of poultry. Some people do this for Thanksgiving. It doesn't make as beautiful a presentation like with the whole bird, but it's a fantastic way to get your bird done. So my mom's birthday celebrations this weekend, so I'm not sure about the timing yet, but I'm hoping to get with you guys tomorrow. If I do the chicken, I will post the ingredients tonight. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful, wonderful Saturday, and I will see you soon. Take care.